Batteries are important to pave the way for a cleaner future, and some would say it's a key in the future energy system. We see continuous growth in the renewable energy, and the need for backup capacity or storage becomes a necessity for the whole system to function. We took a chat with the CEO of SAFT, Mr. Ghislain Lescuyer. He is joined by our program director, Ingvild Mæland.
Ghislain Lescuyer, welcome to ONS Digital 2020. It's a great pleasure to welcome you back to ONS, even if we're in a digital format this time. It's a great pleasure to have you with us. The topic of today is batteries and battery technologies. Over the last years, we've seen that the energy system is getting more and more interconnected. The increasing share of renewable energy demands batteries and storage, and that brings SAFT batteries into a great position. And you're the CEO. So let me start with the broad questions. Batteries have been around for hundreds of years, but why is so important in today's world?
Well, thank you for the question and good morning. I think there is not a single reason for this use of batteries and growing importance of batteries. And I think there are several factors converging and several megatrends that I would like to share with you briefly. The first one is urbanization and industrialization. The second one is more and more interconnections. The third one is disruptive technologies. And the fourth one is the climate change and the growing use of renewable energy. So if we look at the urbanization and industrialization, 200 years ago, maybe 7% of the population used to live in cities. Today, it's probably around 55%, and by 2050, it will be around 70%. So we see that this huge increase, tenfold, in just 200 years, means major changes in infrastructure. In China, for instance, more than 65 cities have more than 1 million people living in the cities. So this urbanization creates a requirement, a need for more infrastructure, for energy, for mobility, for industry. And of course, batteries are critical to power this and supply this energy. The second one is interconnection. And I think the COVID-19 lockdowns just have made us all more conscious of the importance of connectivity. We are all connected, either through smartphones, through laptops, through whatever, trackers, fitness trackers. And we see that greater interconnections means more satellites, more base stations, and therefore more batteries because we need backup solutions, etc. I will come back to that on the very specific application. Third mega trend is probably disruptive technologies. We see that more and more materials are different from the ones that we used to have in the past. It's true for chemistries, it's true for isolation, it's true for systems, it's true for Internet of Things. So we see that those new technologies are just broadening the scope of use of all the batteries. And therefore, for instance, to power the IoT, to power the sensors, we need small batteries. When they are connected together, we need more intelligent systems and therefore more batteries. And the last one is the fight against the climate change. As you know, and it's true in any country, we try to push the use of renewable energy. And this is, of course, part of this long-term strategy of the shareholder of SAFT, which is Total. Total is developing rapidly and in many aspects the use of renewable energy and the energy efficiency solutions. And of course, SAFT is part of this total climate change fight, and batteries play a key role in this game.
Hmm. And building on what you're saying, you say that the megatrends is urbanization, interconnectivity, it's disruptive technology, and it's climate change. But for which segments and for what applications do you see batteries being most relevant for?
I'm sure that people do not realize that it's used in many market segments, in many industry segments everywhere. And let's start with, for instance, aviation. I don't know if you remember this, and there was a movie that was shot on this topic. In the US, an aircraft just went out of power above the Hudson River, and the pilot managed to land the aircraft on the Hudson River. It was a few years ago. And why so? Because in an aircraft, you have backup batteries, either to start the engine or to power auxiliary units. And those batteries were used at that time, and there were SAFT batteries, by the pilot to allow the aircraft to land on the Hudson River. And in any aircraft, you have a battery. If you look at space, I don't remember if you remember the Rosetta mission, which was the landing of a small spacecraft on a planet. And after 10 years in space, we had to power the solar panel and to allow this spacecraft to land on the planet. And that was again due to batteries. When you look at trains and e-buses, transportation, mobility, everywhere, and it's true, of course, for passenger cars, you need batteries to avoid pollution and to, first, for instance, in trains, to back up. When you are in a train which is stopped, for instance, across the channel, you need air conditioning. You need to close the door. You need lights. And if there is no more power in the train, you need those backup batteries. And now we have new applications for batteries in trains, such as traction. Just like for electric vehicles, you can have catenary-free traction with batteries to allow a train to run for 80 kilometers, for instance, from one place to another. When you look at power generation, and I think that's probably a very good illustration today of the use of battery, but renewable, of course, energy is intermittent, and therefore you need energy storage to use the battery which has been stored during the day, for instance, if it's a solar solution, and to allow people to have access to electricity during the night. And to do that, you have what is called time shifting, which allows to use the power generated during the day and stored during the day, thanks to the batteries. Oil and gas is the same. I mean, when you are in a remote platform, offshore platform, or when you have a remote pipeline to power, you cannot have access to the grid, and therefore you need to have access to batteries. So I'm just highlighting a few solutions in which batteries are very helpful. And I think this illustrates the mega trend, because you can relate all these applications to the mega trends I just explained.
What I hear you saying, in addition to the megatrends, you're saying that battery is important for mobility, it's important for safety and reliability, actually, of the different kind of energy systems. And going back to what you mentioned about climate change, ONS is working very hard to kind of build a bridge between oil and gas and renewable, and to meet the low carbon future. How do you see batteries play into this picture?
Well, today it's one of the growing market segments in terms of the use of batteries. And of course, when you look at CO2 emission, there are several segments which are critical. If we want to reduce the CO2 emission, we must work on the power generation, energy. We must work on the use of energy in industry, in transport, mobility, and of course in domestic heating or in the buildings. So what do we do to lower the CO2 footprint? When you look at renewables, and that's what I just explained, when you have a renewable system, either a solar plant or a wind farm, it's intermittent. So by structure, by definition, you need energy storage. So at the power generation level, you have energy storage, which allow to store the energy and to reinject this energy into the grid once there is no sun, or when there is less wind. That's an illustration. A second one is when you have more and more renewable energy, the frequency of the grid is destabilized. So you need to regulate the energy. And the frequency regulation is another illustration of the use of battery in the grid. A third one could be a virtual transmission. You have several power generation places, and when you need to reinject energy at some point in the grid, and when you need to have less energy at another point, then by using energy storage systems and batteries, you can regulate and be more efficient altogether. Of course, we know that passenger cars and vehicles, transportation, is probably the main source of CO2 emission. And this is why there is a big push towards the electric vehicles, but which is true, by the way, also for trains and later on for aviation, is if we look at the studies, we could say that using renewable energy and using electric vehicles could lower by a factor of 3 to 4 the current CO2 emission. Using renewable energy to power the batteries, and then using electric vehicles instead of diesel, for instance, could reduce very significantly this CO2 emission. So we see that in many market segments, the low carbon emission can be triggered by a better use of batteries. And then later on, if we try to project ourselves in the future, we see that hybrid trains with more traction is one of the applications of the future. We see that VTOL aircraft, vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, will be also powered by batteries. So we see the key role that these batteries will use in this decarbonization of the atmosphere. And of course, to do that, we also work on the battery itself, because there is a CO2 footprint for the battery, and that's one of the remarks which is made from time to time. But we work on the eco-design. We work on the use of less and less critical material, and the research which are done in this area are making very good progress. And same for the manufacturing processes and for the recycling of batteries.
I think you're saying that batteries can really pave the way for a clean energy future by making kind of the different elements in the system more interconnected, but also doing something with your own technology and how batteries are produced. And building on that, we've seen an exponential improvement in cost and technology when it comes to kind of the renewable energy production, wind, solar, and so on. What are your projections when it comes to the improvements in battery technology?
Well, to answer to your question, I first would like to point out the main criteria, because what do we mean by performance? Of course, cost is always a criteria, but you have several other criteria depending on the application. For instance, you could have the lifetime. How long should a battery last? And we are making progress on the lifetime of this battery. For instance, when you go in space, as I mentioned, with the Rosetta mission, the battery has to work for more than 10 years. And I say 10 years in very harsh conditions. So lifetime is one example. Safety is, of course, definitely mandatory. And safety, when you are talking about batteries in trains, in aviation, or in passenger cars, safety is a no-brainer. When you look at the number of times you charge and discharge a battery, it's also a way, it's what we call the cyclability, it's also a way to measure the performance of the battery. When you look at the speed you recharge a battery, for instance, more and more people do not want to wait for hours at a battery station to recharge their batteries, and that's one of the hurdles to develop further the EV for the time being. So you need to recharge a battery faster than it is today. And lastly, I would say the energy density, which is the one which is very often publicized in all medias, is when you have more energy density, of course, you have less weight, less space, and you can go further. For instance, with more energy density and with the same size of battery, you could increase the autonomy of a vehicle, for instance. So you see that there are many, many areas in which we are improving the performance of the battery. And R&D is key to develop all the items that I just mentioned. In this respect, we are working on the current technologies, such as lithium-ion, which is a growing technology of growing importance, I would say. And later on, we think that solid state might become the technology of the future. We have many R&D people working on this topic. Why solid state? Because it's by concept and by structure, it's 100% safe. It gives more performance, more density, and it's less costly because there is less material. So we really think that it's a technology of the future. And this is where the world is moving. I'm not saying that batteries, by the way, are the only technology for energy storage. There are all other technologies, such as hydrogen or whatever. But we really believe that in the coming 10 years, there will be a significant increase in performance and in cost. And therefore, this will allow a more better usage of all this batteries technology throughout the different applications. And by the way, batteries, it's not only chemistry, it's also systems. And batteries are embedded into systems with artificial intelligence, with connections, with connectivity devices. And these systems are also part of the performance of the battery. And this is why, when you look at the battery market, it's expected to grow at double-digit growth, between 10 and 15%, depending on the application, on a worldwide basis. And we strongly believe that there is still a lot of work to do, but more and more people are now absolutely convinced that the battery will play a key role in the electrification of the world, in the CO2 emission decrease, and the same for sound pollution. So it's really a technology which is well in place right now, but we still have progress to make it very popular and definitely a success.
I took notice of your words saying that we will see significant improvements in technology and cost when it comes to batteries. And I read that the batteries are more important now than ever. Mr. Lescuyer, thank you very much for joining this ONS 2020 digital program. I hope to see you back in 2022. But for now, thank you.
Thank you very much to you. Good luck for the forum. Thank you.
Thank you.